If you came up with the picture of an annoying, insufferable white woman, it would be Meghan Markle.
Yeah, they were very worried about their safety, which I get that aspect of things after 6 episodes. I wanted to attack them.
President Trump also announced a new trade deal with the UK. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two.
No! Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing.
If you think you've seen every way Meghan Markle and Prince Harry could be roasted, think again. 'Cause nothing could prepare the world for the moment Colin Jost walked onto the Saturday Night Live stage, glanced down at his cue cards, and unleashed a savage monologue that would ignite an absolute firestorm. Under the bright lights, with millions watching live, Colin didn't just poke fun. He delivered a verdict. And within seconds of the punchline landing, people inside Prince Harry's circle claim he completely snapped. This wasn't the polite chuckle of a man who can shrug off a joke. According to insiders, it was a furious meltdown that would send shockwaves through royal watchers and late-night audiences alike. So what exactly did Colin say that crossed the line? And why did Harry's reaction spiral so far out of control? Today, we're unpacking every explosive detail, every behind-the-scenes leak, and every humiliating twist in this bizarre story of a joke that shattered the carefully polished image of the Sussexes. It all began with a story about an international trade deal, innocent enough on its face. President Trump had announced a new agreement with the UK, but Colin Jost saw something far more entertaining buried in the headlines. As he looked into the camera, he paused just long enough to make everyone lean in. Then he dropped it. Britain, he deadpanned, had just one demand in return for the trade deal: that America keep Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The audience erupted. It was one of those moments when laughter spills over into something closer to relief. Finally, someone said it out loud. That punchline did more than mock their move to the US, called their entire worth into question. For a couple who had spent years carefully branding themselves as humanitarian icons, it felt like a brutal slap. And Harry, watching from across the ocean, was apparently anything but amused. What happened next wasn't just a private grumble. According to multiple sources, Harry was furious in real time. Phones started lighting up across his team as he demanded to know why no one had shut this down in advance. He wasn't just angry that SNL had joked about them. He was angry that it was so effective, so cutting, and so public. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who insisted he'd left royal life to protect his family's privacy was now in the headlines precisely because he couldn't let a late-night skit go. And this meltdown would only draw more attention to the very thing he was desperate to bury. But Colin Jost wasn't finished. As if the trade deal joke wasn't bold enough, he turned to another story, Elon Musk's chaotic management of Twitter, and somehow made it about Harry and Meghan. He looked out at the sea of laughing faces and asked why Elon, who built electric cars and planned trips to Mars, was wasting time on social media squabbles. Then he twisted the knife. It would be like the Prince of England throwing away everything just to marry an actress from Suits. The comparison was savage in its simplicity, reducing their entire fairy tale to a career blunder. For Meghan, who spent years trying to step out of the Suits shadow, it had to be excruciating. And for Harry, the suggestion that he'd traded his title for tabloid drama was a humiliation he wasn't prepared to swallow quietly. The most fascinating part is that SNL wasn't alone. The moment Colin's segment aired, other comedians smelled blood in the water. Over on the Golden Globe stage, host Joe Coy grinned at a glittering crowd of Hollywood power players and reminded everyone that Harry and Meghan were still raking in millions from their Netflix deal, without actually producing anything of substance. The laughter was sharp, knowing, and just a little mean, 'cause for many in the industry, it wasn't just a punchline. It was the uncomfortable truth everyone had been whispering. Even fellow entertainers, who understood better than anyone how deals are made, couldn't ignore the awkward reality. The Sussexes had cashed in on their royal status, but failed to deliver the promised blockbuster content. And that was only the beginning of the pile-on. Over on The Daily Show, Trevor Noah took a more personal route. He painted a picture of Meghan looking around her new California mansion and sighing that Harry needed to get a job, because leaving the royal family was supposed to be liberating, not a permanent vacation. The studio laughed, but the subtext was impossible to miss. Their entire brand was built on grievance and victimhood, yet they seemed determined to live like the very elites they claimed to despise. For Harry, who had insisted again and again that he was only defending his family, this was more than ridicule. It was an accusation, the claim that their carefully constructed narrative was a cynical PR move, not a cry for help. And that accusation is precisely what pushed him over the edge. People close to Harry said he felt betrayed, not just by the media, but by the entire entertainment world that had once welcomed them as courageous truth-tellers. Meanwhile, Meghan was left to process the fallout. Behind the scenes, insiders say she was devastated by how quickly public sympathy evaporated. What began as a fairy tale escape had become an ongoing spectacle. Worse still, every attempt to explain only seemed to deepen the mockery. When Meghan tried to launch her new cooking show, rumors spread that she wasn't even cooking the recipes herself. Jimmy Fallon latched onto the absurdity, joking that she was just moving food from one bag into another. The more they tried to share their side, the more they became easy targets. And then came the final indignity, South Park. In a blistering half-hour episode called the Worldwide Privacy Tour, the creators tore apart every contradiction in their public image. There they were, cartoon versions of Harry and Meghan, flying around on a private jet, screaming through megaphones about their desperate need for privacy. Viewers didn't just laugh, they nodded in recognition, because the show had captured the exact hypocrisy that had started to drive people away. The constant demand for attention wrapped in a complaint about being noticed. The most humiliating part? Even people who'd once defended them now admitted the satire was painfully accurate. When South Park shows you yelling about privacy into a megaphone, it's not just a gag, it's a cultural verdict. You have become the joke. And yet, through all this, the Sussexes' real downfall wasn't a single comedian's routine or a cartoon's exaggeration. It was the steady drip of bizarre interviews and tone-deaf statements that made their claims impossible to take seriously. Take Harry's Colbert appearance, where he rambled about pulling the pin on a fun grenade, sounding more like a college frat boy than a serious public figure, or the stiff, almost robotic way he tried to joke about his own trauma. You could feel the audience's confusion. Were they supposed to sympathize or laugh? Perhaps the strangest moment of all came when Colbert tried to give Harry some genuine advice. He quoted a line about ending the debate over what makes a good man and simply choosing to be one. Instead of reflecting, Harry just nodded, muttered "good knowledge," and moved on as if nothing profound had been said. It was a glimpse behind the mask. A moment when you could see how detached he'd become from the ordinary experiences of the people he was trying to reach. And this is the real reason that Colin Jost's jokes hit so hard. Not because they were particularly original. Meghan and Harry have been roasted before. But because, for once, the world seemed ready to agree. It was as if everyone had been holding back polite skepticism for years, only to finally admit what they'd been thinking. None of it made sense. As the laughter roared through the SNL studio that night, Harry's meltdown was more than just a personal embarrassment. It was the sound of the last remaining illusion collapsing. No matter how many Netflix specials, cookbooks, or tell-all memoirs they release, they may never regain the credibility they lost in those moments. 'Cause the truth is, when you demand the spotlight and then whine about the heat, the audience stops caring. Worse, they start rooting for the punchline. So where does that leave Harry and Meghan now? According to insiders, the couple is determined to claw back some semblance of control. There are whispered plans for another round of interviews to set the record straight, and Meghan is reportedly plotting a new media venture. But whether the public is willing to listen is an entirely different question, because the more they insist on explaining themselves, the less people seem to believe them. And that, in the end, may be the most devastating consequence of all. In trying so hard to prove their story, they've made it impossible for anyone to take them seriously. They became the brand they once claimed to hate, a pair of celebrities desperate for relevance no matter the cost. What started as a simple joke about a trade deal turned into the ultimate cautionary tale, a reminder that authenticity can't be manufactured in a Netflix studio, that when the laughter comes, it's already too late to rewrite the script, and that no matter how many PR advisors you hire, you can't escape the consequences of your own contradictions. So was Colin Jost out of line? Maybe. Was Prince Harry's reaction justified? Possibly. But the one thing that's clear, crystal clear, is that the world was waiting for the moment someone would finally say it out loud. The moment when the fairy tale officially became the punchline. And as millions laughed, one thing was certain. No amount of royal indignation could ever put that genie back in the bottle. And yet, despite everything, Despite the global ridicule, the memes, and the Saturday Night Live roast that set it all ablaze, there remains a part of Harry and Meghan's saga that still captivates people. Maybe it's the sheer audacity of their choices, or maybe it's the fact that they refuse to slip quietly into obscurity. Because for all the snark and late-night jabs, they continue to do exactly what they've always done. Speak up, step into the spotlight, and insist that their version of events is the one that matters. After the SNL meltdown, insiders said Harry's anger wasn't just about the embarrassment. It was about control. From the moment he left Buckingham Palace behind, he's tried to rewrite the rules of what it means to be royal, and by extension, what it means to be a public figure. But what he's discovering, perhaps too late, is that you can't just declare yourself immune to criticism because you've decided your motives are pure. The world doesn't work that way, especially not when you sign multi-million-dollar deals and put yourself at the center of every camera lens. You can almost feel the tension behind the scenes. One source described it as a constant push and pull. Meghan wants to keep expanding their brand: cookbooks, podcasts, children's books, lifestyle products. Harry, according to some close to him, has moments of deep regret, where he wonders if trading centuries of tradition for California stardom was really worth it. But once you've crossed that line, there's no easy path back to quiet nobility. And perhaps that's the most tragic part of all. Harry is now a man without a country, without a clear identity, and without the ability to escape the cartoonish version of himself that comedians have gleefully built. Think about that South Park episode again. It wasn't just a cheap shot. It was a cultural autopsy, a scene where Harry and Meghan, holding megaphones, demand privacy while jetting around the globe, perfectly crystallizes why so many people turned away. They couldn't reconcile the image of a wounded couple fleeing oppression with the reality of two extremely wealthy people shopping book deals and TV scripts. And once your story no longer makes sense, there's no PR team in the world that can fix it. But it didn't stop there. The fallout from the SNL takedown rippled far beyond a single night of television. Tabloids pounced on the story, splashing headlines about Harry's fury and Meghan's humiliation across front pages. British commentators gleefully weighed in, framing it as proof that the Sussexes were finally getting what they deserved. Even former palace insiders couldn't resist the temptation to pile on, anonymously leaking that the Queen herself had once warned them their quest for fame would end in disaster. Whether that's true or just convenient retroactive wisdom, it didn't matter. People believed it. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, the mood quietly shifted. You could see it in the way talk shows and award ceremonies treated them. There was no longer the breathless reverence of 2020, when Harry and Meghan were the ultimate symbols of freedom and reinvention. Now they were more like a spectacle, a pair of famous faces everyone recognized but no one quite respected. And that is a far harsher punishment than any late-night monologue. Till there's a lingering question: could they have done anything differently? Was there ever a version of this story that ended well? Some observers say yes, if only they'd resisted the temptation to monetize their grievances. If only they'd stuck to charity work and left the tell-all interviews behind. If only they'd maintained even a sliver of the royal mystique they once embodied. But when you strip away all the hypotheticals, you're left with a simple truth. Harry and Meghan believed they could control their own narrative in an era where narratives are shaped, dismantled, and weaponized by everyone else. And that brings us back to Colin Jost. It's worth remembering that, in the end, he was just doing his job, finding humor in the contradictions that everyone else saw but no one dared say out loud. When he joked that Britain wanted America to keep Harry and Meghan, he wasn't inventing some outlandish smear. He was holding up a mirror to the public's growing fatigue. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was the collective exhale of an audience that had spent years being told to feel one way about the Sussexes, only to realize they felt something entirely different. Even more telling was how quickly the story moved from comedy to cultural commentary. Opinion columns sprang up overnight, dissecting Harry's meltdown as if it were a geopolitical event. Pundits debated whether the Sussexes were victims of a ruthless press or the architects of their own downfall. And somewhere in between all that noise, the couple themselves seemed to vanish. Like the real people behind the headlines had been replaced by cardboard cutouts, caricatures more memorable for their controversies than their convictions.